Okay.
Let's do
Now
this.
that we've sorted that all out. So we're going to talk about the Gwen effect. I'm glad that you're here today, and I think this is important to spread the word about everything that's going on for you. You have this social media platform now, but I think that we really need to start with where the story begins, with your pregnancy and how that kind of all transpired into what it is now that you're kind of dealing with and working towards. So take it from here.
Take it from here. I think it was, 2019?
I'm like, what year is it right now?
What is it? 19 it was. So, as you know, because you were probably like one of the first people I actually reached out when I found out I was pregnant.
For sure.
On the verge of a panic attack.
Yeah.
Gwendolyn.
A pleasant surprise.
Pleasant surprise. We call Gwen a pleasant surprise. I got pregnant, and from there it was a very good pregnancy, I would say. I didn't really have any issues.
No,
just like your norm kind of thing.
And you liked being pregnant. I love being pregnant.
Yeah. I think more so you yourself, like you.
Yeah.
But no, I really enjoyed being pregnant, and I was super excited. And we actually didn't find out the gender of Gwendolyn, as you know. So that was kind of
forgot that you didn't.
Yeah. That was always exciting because we always had that, anticipation. And I think my intuition always told me it was a girl. But yeah, so that was a really exciting time for us.
Yeah. Because you also always wanted to like be a mom.
Always wanted
like
to be
for
a mom.
me, I feel like I didn't care about like having kids until after I got married, but for you, I feel like you always wanted to like be a mom.
Absolutely. That was I mean, and even still, I mean, but yeah, that was a big part of the whole thing and the whole
why it was so exciting
right?
for you. Yeah.
So yeah, like I was saying, everything was really great, really wonderful, and I remember this so clearly at my 22-week checkup with my doctor.
Yeah.
It was a resident at the time. It actually wasn't with my actual doctor, but he kind of just threw in there, like everything looks great. You're 22 weeks now, so just so you know, if baby comes preterm, they can revive it. And I was like,
what an interesting thing to say too, right?
And I was like, premature. Okay, yeah, I heard about that. And we had went to high school with a girl, and I won't mention any names, but who had just had a premature baby, I think months prior to that.
Okay,
so I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, like he's so tiny, like so fragile. And I'm thinking, okay, but like, why would there be any rest?
Something like that, right?
Yeah, I was like, why would there be any thought that I'm gonna have a premature baby? Like I'm young, I'm
feel
healthy,
good, yeah,
I feel fantastic, like, and he's like, oh, there's nothing to worry about. You'll be fine.
Yeah,
it's just I need to more or less say it to cover my end. And I was like, oh, okay. So we went along per usual.
He's like, I need to put this out into the universe.
Yes, but it won't happen kind of thing. And guess what? It did.
Was it that same day?
No. So that was my 22-week checkup. And then I didn't actually meet with my OB until I was 28 weeks.
Okay.
Which I think is pretty typical with an OB, is it?
Yeah, if you're not like high risk, I think. I don't really remember. Like, even though it wasn't that long ago, it feels like it was a long time.
Yeah. So,
but we had the same OB, I think.
We did.
Yeah.
We did. Yes, because you were actually the one who told me to go to her.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of torn between like a midwife or an OB.
Yeah.
So I remember, like booking my appointment with her. I was 28 weeks. And during that time, there was an unfortunate circumstance going on in my life 10 days prior to meeting with my OB that day. And she was well aware, and so was, my medical team with my doctor and stuff, that there was some different circumstances going on, and it caused a lot of stress on me.
And your body.
My body.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to sleep. I wasn't able to eat. It was very stressful.
Super traumatic.
Very
scary.
And
like
for
a
everyone.
Lot of unknowing around the situation.
Yeah. So that in itself was just very traumatizing. So I think it began 10 days prior before Gwendolyn was born. So back to the OB story. I met with her, and she checked me out, and everything looked really great. And again, she knew that like
the situation you're in.
Yeah. But gave the approval. And I remember her saying that I appeared to be showing bigger.
I know, you had a big belly.
Than 28 weeks.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know what? At this point, I don't think it's a concern. We'll have you in for a 32-week follow-up ultrasound to just check everything out. And I was like, okay, great. But,
and they did like your blood pressure and did all
blood work, blood pressure. I think the only thing that was kind of abnormal was my iron levels. So she gave me a prescription for that.
Yeah.
But besides that, it was, like, carry on. We'll see you at 32 weeks.
Yeah.
If anything happens in the meantime, be in touch.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, perfect. So because of the circumstance going on outside of that, I was already in hospital that day and had already been in hospital every day that leading week, to that. Yeah. So it was actually December 23rd. And if you guys are following along, so now I have my OB appointment. I'm done. I feel good about things despite everything going on. I go, I think to level 5 that I was on still, book my ultrasound appointment, got that done. Went down to the cafeteria, had like a tea and I think like a piece of pizza, and everything was good. And 3 hours later, my water broke.
When you were still in the hospital?
When I was still in the hospital, and just hours after I met with the OB.
And they're like, everything's good.
Everything's good. Everything's fine. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, I just pissed myself. And I have to go back to work after the holidays. So how am I going to do this?
Yeah.
Or my water just broke.
Yeah.
It was
Thank God you were at the hospital.
It was a holy fuck moment.
Yeah.
And I quite literally was on level 2 of the hospital. So ICU. And I walked myself up to level 5.
And you're by yourself?
By myself at this point. Mm-hmm. And my pants were soaked. Still burns in the back of my head that moment. And I actually walked myself to my OB office because I didn't know where I was going. Yeah. I didn't know where labor and delivery was. Like, holy F, I'm 28 and a half weeks pregnant.
I'm not ready for this.
I'm not prepared. I'm not ready. Like, what do you mean? And they were like, oh, well, you should probably go to labor and delivery. And I'm like, okay, but I just met with my OB. Like, what do you mean? Like, she didn't even poke me.
Like why would I go there?
Why would I go there? I'm not having this baby. Like, there's no freaking way.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, you need to go to labor and delivery, like, right now. So I walk myself down to the other side of the hallway. Oh, our little special guest.
Our little join, yeah.
And I knock on the door and pick up the phone, and, the nurse gets on there, and I said, I'm 28 and a half weeks pregnant, and I think I'm in active labor.
Yeah.
So
oh
from
my God,
there,
that's so intense.
Yeah. And again, like, a lot of it was a big blur, but there are certain points that do really,
because
like,
your adrenaline's going and you like black out. I drove myself both times in labor. Yes. The first time, Joe had too much to drink at an anniversary party, and I woke up at 3 a.m.
Joey.
And had to drive myself in. And then the second time, I was in like pre-labor for 3 days. My contractions never got regular.
Yeah.
So they'd be like 3 minutes apart, and then they would change like 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And I remember going to Tim Hortons, and I saw Bob and Lee's, and I was like, I'm due anytime. And I talked to Joe on the phone, and he's like, I think you should just like go to the hospital. So I drove myself in, and I was like, hey, I don't really know, but I think that I could be in labor. And they had me wait in the waiting room. And then they brought me in, and they were like, oh, you're 6 centimeters.
6.
Yeah.
Don't you have to be like 8?
I had him in like 4 hours after getting to the hospital.
See, like, I don't even know what a real, like, I honestly don't.
And I think it's all different too, because I was like, my water broke for Luke, but I never ended up like contracting or like dilating, so they had to induce me. Can we get?
But yeah, no, well, that's what I mean. Yeah, so like, I don't really know, and I often joke now about it. I'm like, when I have my next child, like, I probably won't even know when I'm in labor. Like,
and what's normal?
What is normal?
Yeah.
Because I do not know what normal is. So yeah, they took me in. They were really great. They got me like hooked up to everything. Gwendolyn, at this time again, we don't know the gender. So they showed me on the screen. Is he behind my head?
He's up there.
Is he there?
Come here, Dozer.
Oh.
He just can't get enough of you.
He's just our biggest supporter. Where was it? No.
So you went in, they're taking good care of you.
Yeah.
They didn't really know at that point.
No. They hooked me up and they're like, okay, so you are 28 and a half weeks. And they did this swab, and the swab kind of just tells you,
if it was your actual like water breaking,
or if it's just,
like
other potential fluid things, or how far along are we, and can we stop this labor from happening? Can we hold her off? So that was that, and it's kind of faint to me, but I do remember them, hooking me up to vitals and intravenous's, and then when they did find out that I was in active labor, at this point I wasn't feeling any contractions, but there was no way she was not coming.
Right.
They started hitting me in the ass with like steroid needles, which I don't know if you've ever had.
No.
So a steroid needle for that circumstance is to help a premature baby's lungs. So it's like a quick way to kind of get them ready prior to being birthed, because they are so fragile.
Yeah.
That hurt. That hurt, I think, more than actual labor itself.
Because did you have an epidural?
We'll get there. So the epidural, yes, that poor resident. So again, I'm still in shock. Like, my mom is away. I finally get a hold of her, and like her and my stepdad, and then my step sibling rushed in. My dad rushed in. There was so many people a part of my labor.
Yeah.
At this point I'm naked, I'm in shock, I'm puking. I think I have to, go to the bathroom because there's so much pressure. You know that all too well. Yeah. And I'm just in shock. I'm like, this is actually happening. Like, holy F, like, why?
And your body you were already under like so much stress.
I remember looking in the mirror that day. Like, I remember walking into the room's bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I think that was the first moment when I'm like,
you like registered.
This is going to be a really long time. This is going to be a really hard go. And it just like hit me, and I just went faint. And then, of course they gave me gas, and that kind of, I just was sucking back on that because I knew like it's going to be a hard time. So I might as well just enjoy this moment. Right. And so finally my mom arrives. Finally my dad arrives. My best friend Kaylee, of course, happened to just be there visiting elsewhere in the hospital and found out I was in active labor. So she walks in, and
what she's doing.
At this point, like, whoever's in the room has to
because this was before COVID too, right?
Yeah,
so they didn't
COVID, but typically your normal birthing room,
you have like 3 people.
Yeah, you wouldn't have, so I had the medical staff. So I had the neonatal clinic unit come in, and neonatal is just, the NICU team coming in to prepare me and say, okay, baby's this week's in. They'll likely be with us for this long. We'll take her right away. We'll look after her. We'll check her vitals. We're here. And I don't remember, again, I was in shock, so I don't remember the details as much.
Yeah.
But I do remember them coming to talk to me prior to, because they got called in.
But also what a scary thing too, that you're like going through this and they're like, okay, here we are, we're going to like take your child.
You're going to take essentially you're going to give birth to your child. You're going to clip, the umbilical cord, and we're going to take your baby. We're going to whisk her away.
Yeah.
And she's going to stay, or sorry, I should say they, because we didn't know she was a she then.
Yeah.
They're going to stay in the NICU probably until her term date, which was in March.
Yeah.
So that's devastating itself. It's like, wow, I got cheated out of my pregnancy.
Yeah.
Now you're going to take my baby away. Now I have to navigate the NICU life where nobody can prepare you for that.
You feel like your body like failed you.
My body totally, yeah. And I still have days where I'm like so mean to myself. Like, you failed me.
Yeah.
You couldn't protect her.
Yeah.
And
which is like a heartbreaking thing as a friend to hear you like feeling that.
It's horrible. Like, oh my goodness, and I'm just like, why? Like, I'm active, I'm healthy, like, and that's the thing with prematurity is sometimes it just happens.
It's out of your control,
and we don't know why. So anyways, like I was saying, I had the medical team in there made up of, the NICU, and then there was the NICU nurses as well. There was the delivery doctor. there was some OB, not mine, and then there was a bunch of residents.
Yeah.
And then there was my family.
Yeah.
And so on top of that, they were talking to me, and I remember saying to a nurse, like, this isn't my birth plan. Like, this isn't what I planned. Like, I don't even have her room done. I haven't even had a shower yet.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? And she goes, honey, what is a birth plan? And I think that's a really important thing to know when, because there's such a thing on, okay, well, birth plans, and
you think
we're gonna plan this, and it's gonna be beautiful, and it's gonna be great. Well, there's no fucking birth plan. I'm sorry. Like, some things are so beautiful and so great, but there's a lot of times where it's like, it's life,
but
and
that's
it doesn't
parenthood
go.
too, right?
And that's parenthood, and I think we really need to shed a light on that's what happens. And it can happen. And in my circumstance, it did happen. So Gwendolyn came very fast. I went from, I think, 3 centimeters to 7. And the poor resident who was doing my epidural was backed up that day. So he finally came through, and he was asking me a bunch of questions and signing off. And I remember whispering under my breath to my mom, will he just shut up? Please just shut up. And my mom's like, Tamara. And I'm like, I just need him to shut up. Because I just need...
You're like, let's go.
Let's go. Like, I'm sick. I'm miserable. I'm sad. I'm angry. Like, just put it in me so I don't feel pain.
So I can feel a little bit better.
And give me some gas.
Yeah.
So Gwendolyn came. Yeah. It was instant. I think I pushed 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
2 or 3 times. And I still remember, Kate, the look on my dad's face. He was directly, like, in the back, in the labor room, looking, and he just kind of went like this. And of course,
John, he's so, like, quiet.
My dad, for you guys that don't know, my dad, he's a very, like, old school farmer. I mean, obviously has helped give birth with cattle for a lot of years. But now, we're all in, I think everyone was just shocked and speechless in this room of...
I just can't picture your dad shocked.
It was WTF. Like, he just was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Because you're his baby too, right?
Yeah,
like your only child,
I mean, like, it wasn't just me grieving my pregnancy. It was everyone. And now it's like, okay, their grandchild, like...
How are we going to deal with this?
How
what
are
does
we doing
this?
Like, this is a scary time, right? And I remember looking at the nurse and being like, well, the doctor told me that they could revive them at 22 weeks. And I was like, 28 and a half isn't bad. And she's like, well, I've delivered earlier. And I was like, okay, but still, I didn't know a whole lot. Like, I really didn't know what came with the risks of a premature baby because it's not talked about enough.
Yeah.
So she comes out. What is that? Is it Blades of Glory or is it Blaze of Glory?
Blades of Glory. Yeah.
Is it that? That's how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Will Ferrell?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. So we'll use that. Fast and Mighty. She surprisingly came out eyes wide open. I remember she was super tan, super dark, and like a head full of black hair.
Yeah.
And she made this little peep. And Kaylee, our friend, if you guys know Kaylee, we all love to chat, but especially Kaylee. So she was also speechless. I don't think she said a whole word through the whole labor.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it was, oh my God, it's a boy.
Oh yeah.
It's a boy. It's a boy. And I was like, oh my God, and I was like, that's a vagina. That's not a boy. That's a vagina. And my mom again was in such shock that she couldn't even cut the umbilical cord. So
too much, yeah.
The resident
Who
cut it.
Okay,
it was a resident. Like, they're like, okay, well, we need to get this baby. Like, she's very fragile. Somebody cut the damn cord.
Yeah.
I was like, Mom, cut the cord. She's like, I just can't. I can't do it. I'm like, I can't. So, the resident cut her. And again, like, she was whisked away. And, after
did you get
that,
to, like, hold her anything?
Not at all. Not at all. And I think that is the most devastating thing as a mother, because you went through this time with your child and you feel them in you, and I mourn that feeling of them putting that baby on my chest.
Well, and that's so important. They talk about, like, how important, like, skin to skin
is, and it just, wow.
Yeah.
Like, you're here.
You already feel like so much has been, like, taken from you up to this point.
And it was like from the labor delivery doctor to the neonatal doctor to the NICU, which is right around the corner for that reason. because of those fragile births.
And she was like crying. She was like alert, obviously.
She wasn't crying. She was alert, which is, quite good for a 28.5-week baby.
Yeah.
Her eyes were wide open and she made a little bit of a peep. But that was that. And it happened so fast and so quick. And I remember thinking, wow, like she was here, she was in me, and now she's gone.
Yeah, within like a matter of hours.
Yeah.
But your doctor was like, everything's good.
Yeah, and my OB, like, everything's fine. And then my water broke 3 hours after I seen her.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, I mean...
So at this point, you didn't really know, like, what that was going to look like for you, but you also didn't know about, like, any, like, how Gwen's health was going to be or anything like that.
Not at all. So at this point, I'm super stoned off of, pain medicine, everything that they're injecting me with to keep me stable. The gas, I just sucked that right back because that was the only thing. And the epidural's great. Epidural, but again, epidural was late, so I felt every bit of it. Okay. And then all Gwendolyn was 2 pounds, 10 ounces. Yeah. I mean, I felt her coming
it's
through.
It's still enough, right?
Yeah, the epidural definitely came after the fact.
Came later. Which was probably okay, like, knowing how you're probably feeling.
Yeah, and that's just it. So I remember everything, like, I remember it was just a bloody mess, obviously. And my step sibling came in and they're kind of like, wow, it looks like Dexter in here. And I just remember.
You're like, yikes.
Everyone's like unwinding, and that comment just like still
sobered everyone up.
Yeah, everything just right. And I remember them being like, we can bring her into the isolette. And I was still, again, on the table. And they brought her in this little isolette thing, and intubator.
Yeah.
And again, I couldn't touch her. I could only look through and see her for those short few minutes because she needed to get back and be
monitored,
evaluated, and under observation.
Yeah.
So it really reminded me. Have you ever seen that episode of the Rugrats? Or is it Rugrats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when he has the little brother.
Yeah, and he's a preemie. So he was in this little preemie. That's what it reminded me of. And I was like, wow, like,
what
again,
a funny, like,
resemblance, right?
Weird, like, nostalgic thought.
Yeah, and that in my mind's like, I'm super stoned on gas. Like, here's my child in this intubator.
Of all the things you could be thinking
I'm like,
of.
Rugrats. Yeah. Like, you look like that little baby in there.
Baby
and
Dill.
She was so little. She was
Baby
so
Dill.
Little. Baby Dill.
Yeah.
Hey, Baby Dill. But yeah.
Responsibilities.
That was a good one. So yeah. So they wheeled me into the NICU, and I'm telling you, and I'll tell everybody this, nobody can prepare you for the NICU. Like, no matter how much you know, or if you know you're going to be prepared going in. I think it looks like an ICU. They have a station. There's one nurse on at all times through their shift, if not 2, depending on how fragile the baby is.
For the whole NICU?
Yeah. Like, there's one nurse per baby.
Wow.
And you have different units.
But when you walk in, it's like everything's like open. You can see.
Well, so you walk into the room, and this is just in Kingston. Like, there's different areas, but there's a unit clerk that lets you in because it is a closed unit. Yeah. And, you have to, hey, I'm so-and-so, my baby is this and that. And they say, okay, well, let me go check if your nurse is ready. And so then there's another, like, okay, now I have to be checked to come in. And, obviously you sterilize and you gown up and stuff, and you go in and you see all these little fragile babies in these intubators. And there's also, full-term babies that have maybe breathing issues, or, their blood pressure is out of whack,
concerns,
or, little concerns there and that. But it's such a fragile place.
Yeah.
And
because I never even have seen like a preemie baby until I met Gwen. And actually, I didn't even meet Gwen until like 7 months, 8 months. Yeah.
And a lot of people hadn't. Like, I remember sending you pictures shortly after I was born. But I remember going in, and there was bright lights. There was like a lot of noises,
like a TV show.
Well, there was a lot of noises. Like, of course, there's monitors, so there's monitors going off. That's still triggered to me to this day.
Yeah.
There's different codes going off in the background on the speakers. It's a very different lifestyle. So, it really still triggers me to think about it and to talk about it.
And being in hospitals now.
And I remember going in and I was just like, can I hold her? Like, can I touch her? And they're like, no, like, unfortunately not for so many hours. And I forget what the term is, but when a premature baby is born, they use little to no touch as much as possible because they're so fragile.
Yeah. They
just want to make sure that they are able to handle what they're being dealt with at that point in time. So that was really hard, you know, and I kept looking at her and I was like, wow, like she has her dad's lips, or she has my skin tone, or she has my long fingers. But yet I'm looking at her with this CPAP mask on. So I really can't see her. But I was like, she's absolutely beautiful. She's mine.
Yeah.
She's my baby.
But that's it too, right? Is that this like dream that you had about like motherhood is now like in front of you.
Yeah, but it's there in front of me, like, but it's so far away. Yeah. Right? Like I can't touch her. I can't, you know, she can't hear me.
Experience it.
She can't hear me. And like how traumatic is that for a baby too, right? Like whisked away from their mummy and their where it should have been nothing like that at all.
Yeah. So at that point, had you like learned about like anything about like Gwen's medical?
No.
At what point did that come that you like?
I think at that point, like the only thing I knew is, you know, usually babies who are born early, they will stay in the NICU until at least their actual birth due date, which I think mine was March 11th. Sorry.
Yeah.
So already there, you know, she was born December 23rd. I already had to know, okay, well, I'll be leaving this hospital without my baby until her birth date, at least. So no, I really didn't know anything. And then I kind of went back into the room. And this is something that really upsets me, and I really hope it changes in our system at some point. They brought me back to a room with other mothers who had just given birth like myself, but with their baby.
Right.
So here I am with my friend at the time,
grieving like this whole experience,
recovering from this, you know, this traumatic experience. And there's a mother across from me and there's a mother beside me who just came back with their baby.
And they're like happy as can
be.
They're
happy. Like there's, you know, they're feeding, they're
with their family.
They're learning to all these things. And my nurse keeps coming in and being like, do you need Ativan? Do you need lorazepam? Like, what can I give you to numb you? And I'm just like,
you're just like, get me out of this room.
Get me out of this room.
Yeah.
So that night, obviously didn't sleep very good, because I think we were just getting settled in, maybe like an hour after everything had happened. And here comes the NICU team walking into the room. And they didn't even have to say anything. And I think it was 2 doctors and a resident. They didn't even have to say anything. I could just see the look on their face. And I said, do you not know what I'm fucking going through?
Yeah.
Do you not know what's happened outside of this birth? Now my baby's a premature baby. What are you going to tell me?
What else? Yeah.
And they said, your baby is not only premature, but she has been diagnosed with TEFEA, which is esophageal atresia. And for those who don't know, because then I'm like, what the fuck does that supposed to mean? Like, I literally was like, what are you talking about? Like, what is this?
That means nothing.
Like, what are you, you know what I mean? Like, go on Google, like, okay, 1 in 25, I think, something odd babies, you know, life expectancy good, but if not fixed, you know, early on can be detrimental. And they were explaining it to me, and obviously it just went through one ear and out the other because it's a rare birth defect. And I said, a birth defect? Like, nobody told me in this pregnancy. What are you talking about? A birth defect? And they're like, well, we don't really know why it happens, but it happens early on in gestational time. And I'm kind of like, how did this go missing?
Yeah.
You know, and I often wonder, if I made it to 32 weeks, would it have shown up? on the ultrasound.
And you've already had ultrasounds at this point.
Already had ultrasounds at this point. Everything looked fantastic.
Did they say that that's something that they could have caught or no?
In some cases. So I know in some cases, and I know some mothers did know prior to giving birth.
Right.
Because with most babies, they have that anatomic, what is it?
Yeah.
The fluid sac
Yeah.
in the stomach. Well, in Gwendolyn's case, yes, she wasn't able to swallow any of that fluid because with her condition, she was born unable to swallow.
Right.
So the top of her esophagus was a dead pouch. So it was just a pouch. And the bottom of her stomach, like the bottom of the esophagus, attached to her windpipe. So they didn't attach together, and usually they would. So again, when you're on ultrasound, you should see that there's fluid in baby's tummy.
Right.
But there wasn't, obviously. And maybe it would have shown, but it didn't with us because we were still early on. Mm-hmm. And that's why I was so big at the time as well, because I was carrying all this extra fluid.
I see.
Yeah. Yeah, and...
Unreal.
Yes. So they lay this on me. And I'm like, what does that mean? And then they go into, okay, well, you're going to meet this wonderful surgeon. You know, this was what needs to happen as soon as possible. But unfortunately, we're dealing with a very premature baby and a very fragile baby at the time. But we need to quite literally go into her, detach the esophagus from her windpipe because it's very dangerous. We need to sew up that windpipe and clip back the esophagus.
Oh my God.
And then on that point, it was like, okay, and then she'll be okay. Well, no, because if the two can't reach each other at the time, we'll have to wait for them to grow together, because as they grow together, it will be an easier connection.
Right.
I was like, well, when is this going to happen? Well, we're going to evaluate, keep her under observation, and see. Okay.
Yeah.
So, wow. I remember looking at them and I'm just like, are you kidding me?
One more thing.
Are you kidding
But then
me?
it also, like, you're out of control. You can't do anything about it. You feel so helpless already.
Yeah.
And then now you're like, okay, I don't know what the next step is
And I think that's the thing with, like, a lot of parents who have premature babies is you don't have a control. Yeah. You don't have a say. You know what I mean? Like, when I asked the nurse, can I touch her? And can I smell her? No. No.
So when she ended up getting this surgery and everything, you had to, like, travel with sick kids, and then your journey, like, moved from...
Yeah. So you and Joe actually came that next morning, and I remember catching you as
we went and like bought like gifts and things, and we were so excited, and we knew you were going to be upset. And I remember we walked in and you were just bawling.
Yeah, because they literally just again like came in and were like, your daughter needs life-saving surgery. You need to sign this consent. The surgical staff are on their way.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is 19 hours after I gave birth to her. So now they're putting her on a table. She's 2 pounds, 10 ounces. She's been intubated at this point, and she needs life-saving surgery because her belly is extending with air, and she is not doing well. She is destatting.
Is that when she got like her feeding tube?
Yeah. So I met with the surgical staff, and I remember you walking in and you're like, hey, and I'm like, I've got to go sign Gwen off. I literally have to send her off.
We like went
I don't know if she's gonna live. We kind of just passed each other, and they sat me down and I asked all these questions, and the surgical staff kind of answered, and they were like, but we need to go.
Yeah.
We need to go. This needs to happen.
Urgent. Yeah.
It's urgent. It needs to happen now. You need to sign this. And wow.
Yeah, so you're like, okay.
Yeah. So more or less, okay, still don't know what the heck this is. Still don't know.
Sorry.
Can we cut what's going on? Hello. Okay. Still don't know what. Sorry, I'm not close enough. There we go. I still don't know what's going on. And that's when you guys were actually in the room, and my OB had come in the next morning and was this social service worker, and you're in there, and I think maybe my dad and my mom have arrived at that point. And that's when I finally had a meltdown, and I said, somebody get me the fuck out of this room. This is unfair. It is torture to be sitting here when my child has now been taken for life-saving surgery, and you have me with 5 other women in the same block having their babies. They're laughing, they're smiling, they're enjoying those first few moments. And I'm literally crying and not knowing if my child is coming back alive or not.
Yeah.
So
you'd think that would be something
that tears me.
Yeah.
You know, I hurt and I mourn for other mothers that have to experience that the way I did.
Yeah.
That's not okay. There should be a designated area, I think, for mothers that have gone through that can go to a private area with their family to grieve.
Yeah.
You know?
Especially, too, because, I mean, it's not always the outcome that, you know, some people do lose their babies at those moments, or they have, you know, stillbirths and things like that. And so there should be, and you think that there would be a space that, you know, moms that are having different experiences with their labor and with their birthing, that there's a safe space.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that was heart crushing. So yeah, then they finally moved us in the private room. And I think at this point I was just so numb. I don't recall a whole lot. Like, maybe you can recall some of it, but
I just remember like trying to make conversation with your dad, which is already really hard. And then being in this like situation, you know me, I'm like, is it a good time to like crack a joke? Like, you know, that's how I deal with things, is like making jokes. So just like dealing with your serious dad.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot.
And I remember you just like laying in bed with me and
I just laid with you.
We just talked and we held, and you were still pregnant with O.
Yeah.
So I just remember feeling like, well, why can't that be me? Like, why did my body fail me?
I know. And I definitely felt too like sadness for you. Yeah. You know what I mean? That like, I didn't want to like expose you to like anything else that you feel like was taken from you. You know, I felt guilty.
It was just, you know, when they came back to the room and the surgical staff eventually showed in, you know, later than what was expected, they told me that she made it through. It was a tough procedure. She had made it through, and, you know, they put a Penrose in her stomach, which let go a lot of the air and stuff, and all of her bowels and everything looked great, and but that was all that they were able to do.
Right.
They weren't actually able to go in near the esophagus area and detach that fistula. So that just meant that there were more procedures and more surgeries to come. But for now, what their main idea was to keep this baby alive.
Right. It was just one step at a time.
Yeah. And nobody told me, and I didn't know until later, but they had actually lost Gwen a few times.
In the surgery.
Their stats. Yeah. In the surgery, you know, she really scared the hell out of the nurses. This was Christmas Eve at this point. You know, they would often laugh later on, but like she kept them on her toes.
But also showed that like Gwen was going to be a fighter, and like
Gwen was an absolute fighter. And, you know, that's what Gwen is known for. I mean, she was a fighter. And
stubborn like her mom.
Like her mama. Yeah. So, and I remember walking in, and I didn't really go to the NICU that day because I was just so numb and so scared. And
you needed a mental break probably too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just cried. And after everyone left, my mom obviously stayed with me, and she just held me in the little bed that we were in. And I think it was maybe at 11 o'clock at night. And I said, I want to go see her.
Yeah.
I want to go see her. And we walked in, and it was so quiet, and the nursery area, and the lights were off, and she was so peaceful. And I remember walking in with my mom, and they handed me this bag of goodies. It had different sleepers in it, and a little teddy bear, and other things that you know, previous parents had donated to the NICU. And I thought, wow, this is so nice, but my baby's going to die, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't know how sick she was. You know, the 24th and the 25th were really, really scary for the medical team and for myself. But
you were just at this point, like, waiting.
I was numb. Like, I was just kind of... that's when my disassociation started.
Yeah.
I prepared myself for the worst. So I just was like, if it happens, it happens.
Well, I remember too, like having a phone call with you. We had like a 3-hour phone call, and I just like laid on the bathroom floor. And this was when because so like she had her feeding tube put in.
Yeah.
She eventually did have her TEF surgery.
Yes.
At Sick Kids.
Yes.
So you guys were like airlifted to Toronto.
Yeah.
You were in Toronto for how many days? Like how many days were you in the hospital?
So I think, yeah, Toronto came later on. So she had 2 more procedures at Kingston, and then it was
a brain bleed at Kingston.
Yeah. So what happened with that? So this is what they don't tell you, and I wish they would prepare more people, like more parents with, is what can happen when you have a premature baby.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that there could be a high risk of brain bleeds, a high risk of neck, which is, an infection of the bowels where it eats away at
it's probably hard because there's so many things too that could happen.
And there is,
right?
and I know they don't want to bring it up unless it really needs to be talked about, but I think even a little bit of desensitization before the actual
even if it starts at the OB, right?
Yeah, even if it just starts with, here's a pamphlet, this what could happen. These are things that could come along with it. This is how it's handled. This is how it's diagnosed. This is when they look for it.
Education.
Instead of, okay, so we have this surgery. Days later, it was, I remember we were discharged and they discharged us at the hotel in Kingston, which is really nice of the hospital to keep us nice and close.
Yeah.
They even actually kept me in hospital for a few more days just to be close to her. So I really praise them on doing that for me. But I just remember thinking to myself and to my mom, like, I can't keep putting her through this. I'm going to tell them to give me comfort care.
Mm-hmm.
Comfort care. Like she's fighting for her life. I can't do this anymore. I can see her crying through, being intubated. I can't hear her cry, but I can see it.
Yeah, I remember having this conversation.
It's not fair. So I went in, and that night I went in and I sat down with the social worker and I said to the neonatal unit, I said, this, I can't do it anymore. And then they told me, well, your daughter has experienced a brain bleed at a level 3 and 4, and doing what I do and working with acquired brain injuries, so injuries that happen after birth, I knew this isn't good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, what does that mean? And they said, well, she has a high chance of cerebral palsy, but we don't know until she's at those different milestones in her life.
Yeah, those stages.
And because she had a 3 and 4 bleed, some of it, bled into different parts of the brain as well than just her ventricles. So they threw that on me, and I'm already at the point where, like, I don't want to put this baby through anything
more.
Like
you just want to, like, give up.
And mind you, like, we're at day 6, and I still haven't held her.
Yeah.
Right? And, then the doctor looked at me, and she said, no, we truly believe that she still has some fight in her.
Yep.
And then they offered to hold Gwendolyn for the first time. So when I held Gwendolyn for the first time, I remember looking at her, and it was like, you know what, baby? Like, it's you and I against the world.
Yeah.
It's you and I. It's our fight. I'm with you to the bitter end.
And that probably changed
It changed my whole mindset. I was like, nope. Like, medical mom on. Like, we're in drive. We're ready. We're going to conquer. We're going to, like, be successful in this. And, of course, I didn't know what was going to happen, but it was, yeah. So, and I think that's where that, the whole sunshine, you are my sunshine came in, because I just remember thinking to myself, just sing to her.
Yeah.
And
that's right. That was the first song.
That was the first song. And then the nurses put me in my arms, and she looked at me and I looked at her, and I sang this beautiful song to her, and her vitals, actually, her heartbeat came down.
Which is incredible, because you are a terrible singer.
I am a horrible singer.
So that's a big deal.
I'm a horrible singer, but I sang loud and proud.
But she loved it. She loved it.
And the nurses even said, like, we needed this. Everyone needed this.
Yeah.
I needed it.
Spirits lifted.
I needed reassurance. I needed to feel like I had some control again. Gwendolyn needed, because her heartbeat came down. It was just such a beautiful moment for myself and the NICU staff.
Yeah.
So from there, Gwendolyn, so we had the brain bleed, and then days later she was diagnosed with neck. So we didn't know how that was going to happen, if she was going to have another surgery. So at this point in time, I think, when she was diagnosed with neck, I think she already had another procedure done where they were able to clip the esophagus from the trachea and stitch it up. So that's great. And then they went in again for something else. I can't remember, before we actually had been transferred to Toronto to do the final surgery.
So how many surgeries did she have? Like
so
total?
She had 4 in total.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so she had her first one at 19 hours old. She had her second one on the 31st. She was famous with dates. So the 31st was the second one. And then the third one was 2 days after my birthday. And that was that for Kingston. And it was more or less, okay, we keep her here. We keep her growing was the biggest thing. We feed her via G-tube. You can hold her, cuddle her, soak all of that in.
Yeah.
But we're here now to allow her to grow, to be stable enough for the last surgery of the connection. And that's when I asked the team to inquire sick kids. Not because I don't trust Kingston. They saved my daughter's life. But when you go to a much bigger hospital, there's a bigger resource. Her diagnosis isn't so rare like Kingston.
Right.
And Kingston was. But when we were transferred to sick kids, I remember it would happen really fast. They agreed to take on Gwendolyn's case. And they flew us by cargo plane, which is worse. I hate flying. So I remember thinking to myself, oh my fuck, if this girl hasn't put me through enough, and now I'm flying on a cargo plane and you can feel every bump, you can hear every like crack, whatever. So yeah, we loaded her up and we were off to Toronto, and in the same day they were able to measure her under x-ray because they have more advanced tools for pediatrics, obviously, in Toronto, and see where the gap was. And I remember there was, I think, 2.5 centimeters between the top and the bottom, and the surgical staff wanted to wait. So that was completely devastating.
Yeah.
Like we get housed in Ronald McDonald, just down the road from Sick Kids, which was a lovely area. We're like, okay, we're ready to be up here for a longer stay, get settled in, and then they're like, you can either stay up here and wait for the procedure, or we can send you back to Kingston. And I was like, fuck. What do you mean? So we ended up going back to Kingston just because, I had resources here in my family.
Yeah.
And I'm from the middle of nowhere, and Toronto is a huge cultural shock to begin with. But
this is too much.
It's too much.
Take me back to the farm.
Too much. Take me back to the farm. I got lost multiple times, like from the 5-minute destiny, like between the Ronald McDonald house. Like it was my mother and I navigating Toronto.
Yeah. And I mean, just your mom.
My mom.
With directions.
And
I remember your mom driving on the 401 when we were going to a college. Yeah. And she was freaking out. So I can only imagine.
She still talks about that day.
Yeah.
That was,
I think we were like all drinking and she didn't even want to be the one driving. No. And we were like, we can't drive.
I think she did about 80 on the 401 the whole way there.
65
maybe. I was being nice.
That's funny. So you went back to Kingston.
So we went back to Kingston, and that's where we resided until her next gap study. Mm-hmm. And the gap study was what she received the first time, stating that, they wanted it as close as possible. If she's able to be okay, it just makes it for an easier connection. You're playing with anatomy here. So if you pull up, you're pulling up on the stomach.
And at this point, she had her feeding tube. Yeah. She was like starting to grow. She was starting to thrive.
Growing, so we're just waiting. We're growing, But again, it's like, I can't take my baby home until she has us connected. So I think it was 2 weeks later, we got called back for a gap study. And we went up by vehicle this time, via vehicle, and she went up by ambulance. And again, gap wasn't as close as they wanted it to be.
So they wanted to push it off.
So we were sent back to Kingston again. Mm-hmm. Thank goodness for Kingston, because you're like, yeah, we'll take Gwen anytime. We'll show she can reside here. Because if you think of it, like, it's back and forth doesn't always happen. So we were very fortunate for that. And I was very fortunate for that because I had you girls at home and my family.
And you were still dealing with these other things that were happening in your life too.
Still dealing with a lot of things that were happening outside of the Gwendolyn circumstance. Yeah. So I just needed to be home. And I think that's why they were so forgiving for that.
Yeah.
Finally, we got the call for the surgical date was April 21st. So we went up a few days ahead to get prepared for it. And there was no sending us back after that. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, like, we're going to mentally prep myself. And at this time, COVID had happened. So we were now residing in a hotel on Yonge Street instead of Ronald McDonald. So here we are on Yonge, navigating that.
Like, good times.
My mom wasn't able to be in there with me. Gwen's dad wasn't being able to be in there at the same time. So I was by myself. And I remember the morning of the surgery, we went in really early, and I just sat with her and I talked with her like I would every morning before her surgery, and really talked with her and saying to her, whoever watches Grey's Anatomy would know when they come in, they're all scrubbed in up, and everybody has their position in a surgery. So
yeah,
we go around a circle, and obviously I'm mom, so I introduce myself and Gwendolyn, and the surgeon introduces himself, who at this point I already knew very well, and the RPN who was on, and then the RN, and then there was a surgical nurse as well, introduced herself. All lovely people.
Yeah, big team.
Anesthesia, and they're the big guys in the room, right? Surgical staff will often say they have the easy job with using their hands, but anesthesias are the ones that keep the person alive and stable during a surgery like that.
Were you able to go in,
yes.
like wheel her in?
Yes. So after that, and if there was any questions, you pretty much hand your child over. And I remember her and I walking down, and I actually have a picture of it. I should bring it up sometime. But she kind of smiled at me when walking down to the surgical room with the staff, and it's okay, Mom, I got this.
Yeah.
It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Because it was a quite lengthy procedure. It was, I think, over 6 hours long.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, like, she's in some of the best hands in the world.
Yeah, I'm glad that you felt that way going in.
Yeah, and I just remember that little grin, that little shit-ass grin she had, like, got this.
Yeah.
Good, we're good, Mom.
So her surgery went good.
Her surgery went so good. Went so good. And
it's finally, like, over at that point.
Yeah,
like,
finally over.
End in
finally
sight.
Over. But we had quite a bit of recovery. She had a really hard time with reflex, and again with her feeds and introducing them like that. So we were in hospital. So her surgery was April 21st. We didn't get discharged until June 11th.
Wow.
For home.
And then at home was like a new thing. I remember like all the medications. I remember, like her feeding tube.
Oh, yeah.
Like it was
utilizing
waking
fetal
her
tube.
up.
And I remember when them sending me home, and I had to like test, like I had to be on observation for like 24 hours where I did all the medicines. I did all her feeds. I did all of the
Because now you're at home and you're like, I have to take care of all these.
They pretty much were giving me permission, and they put me, like the kids put me in this G-tube class. They put me in this first aid class. Like it was like, okay, so now we're sending you home with all these credentials.
Yeah.
And it was scary. Like, you watch your child on these vitals for so long, but you have to look at your child and know if she's uncomfortable because you don't have vitals at home
and
to
this
say
whole
that she's
support
upset.
team. Yeah.
Yeah. So discharge was a beautiful day. I just prayed. I was like, Gwen, don't pull any shit. Like, we're going home. I remember saying to them, I was like, my dad's on his way. My mom's on his way. Her dad's on their way. Like, we're going home. And yeah, it was beautiful. We got home.
No, that's
okay.
You got home,
and we got home, and it was quite a rally to get there. She puked on the way, I think twice per projectile vomited.
Of course she did.
Of course she did.
But if that was the worst, then like.
But it was like, you know what? She's home. She's home.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. Home was a beautiful day, and she actually arrived home on my grandfather's day that he had passed away. So it was a blessing.
Kind of like a weird, like a weird
blessing,
moment.
Yeah.
And then so when she got home, like at that point, beyond all the medical needs that she had, and like I know you had so many appointments.
Yeah, we had a lot of specialists. I think over 15 on our team,
which is crazy.
Yeah.
She was like healthy, right?
She was, you know what? Like she was like her team had followed her from the very beginning. Were like, this is the same Gwendolyn. Are you sure? Like,
yeah,
she was hitting every milestone. she was laughing,
She
walking,
became super
talking,
social.
running, swearing. Like, she was just like a
little
force to be
spitfire.
reckoned with.
Yeah.
She was eating by mouth. We were just almost off of the G-tube before Gwendolyn passed. Like, she loved life. She loved everyone in life. She loved
Her
it
dogs.
all. She loved her dog. She loved to dance. She loved her Whitney Houston. Like, she just loved everything about it.
Good. And so when, like, I feel like she was okay. She was good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like, unexpectedly, because there was a lot of moments that we were worried that, things were going to come through for Gwen.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it kind of turned into out of nowhere, like another situation, and you lost Gwen.
And that's what it was. And I think that's what death is. It's like you're here 1 minute and then you're not. Next.
Yeah. And it was so unexpected, right? So you were out for dinner. And you had this experience, and all of a sudden she was here and then she was gone.
Yeah. So it was a Tuesday, and like every Tuesday, I went to work. She was at her grandmother's place, and we were actually having a dinner for her grandfather at the time for his birthday. And everyone was feeling so good. I mean, 5 days prior to, she just had her checkup with the neonatal clinic, and I think it was they were testing her on almost her 24-month checkup.
Yeah.
And she was flourishing. And, that Monday, I did notice that she was a little off. And I thought, okay, like, I'll call her team at Sick Kids. She went to playgroup
and she was supposed to have her another like brain scan, right?
Another brain scan coming up. She had multiple appointments coming up, yeah. But everything seemed to be okay. Like, we did our COVID tests, everything was fine. She went to playgroup like she would every Monday. Yeah. I took her in to see my family doctor that night. Everything looked so good. Like, she was happy, she was fine. I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm just overreacting, because it's a very easy thing to do as a medical mom. Like,
always
you
be
can
on high
never
alert.
be not too prepared. And I thought, okay, maybe I'm overreacting, but I just want to make sure. So got the clearance from the medical staff. The Tuesday, she was back with her grandmother, and I was working, and so we planned to have this dinner, in which my dad had joined in as well. And I showed up, I think it was a couple hours before Gwendolyn had passed, and she was, she had learned a new word that day.
What was the word?
Ice. And she would say it like that. You know how she'd always like
drawn out words.
Ice.
That's cute.
Yeah.
And cash. Yeah.
But yeah, so she was, she had a beautiful day. I mean, she baked a cake. She sang and danced. I have videos that was sent to me from that day that she passed. She was out on a 4-wheeler ride.
Oh, yeah.
She did
she had
everything
like a full day.
She loved.
Yeah.
She did everything she did. And it was, after dinner, I remember feeding her for the last time, and she got settled in with a drink, and she went to her room there, and she was watching Scooby-Doo, and then all of a sudden she started to kind of get upset, and I was like, well, what's that about? Like, I was eating, and she always wanted to be with me, so I was like, well, I'm just gonna finish eating. And so her father went and grabbed her and brought her back, and he's like, I don't know what's wrong with her. And she started kind of hyperventilating, and I was like, Gwenny, babe, like, you're okay. And she would do that sometimes if she had reflux, or if she had a stucky where her esophagus, maybe something was in there, but that couldn't have been, because she had been done eating for a while at this point. And we're like, what's going on? And so I took her outside, and I was like, look. And I would often redirect her, whether it was with a song, or I was like, there's the moon. And it was still sunny that day, but I was like, where's the moon? Because she loved the moon. But this was very different. It was like my daughter went from vibrant, bright, beautiful to lifeless.
Yeah.
Within
just
seconds.
Couldn't. I remember you said that it was like, she just was like gone.
It was gone.
Yeah.
And her grandma ran out, and I remember she took her from me, and all I could remember in the words that still haunt me to this day is, she's not breathing, call 911. And I remember everyone just kept working on her, doing CPR, frantically running around, waiting for the ambulance, 911, fire truck, whoever to come.
Yeah.
And I'm running around the yard like a lunatic, and I'm on my knees, and I'm begging to whoever, please don't take my baby from me. Please don't take my baby. And I kept looking at Gwendolyn, but at this time, like, she would just look right past me, like she wasn't there.
Yeah.
Am I grateful that she passed away as quick as she did? And I know that now, yes. But in that moment, I didn't really...
You didn't understand.
I didn't think she was gone.
Yeah.
I was like, nope, like, this is just going to be another hospital.
Because that's what you've experienced.
Yeah,
right?
I was like, we're just going to be, like,
scares.
picked up via ambulance. We're going to go in again. Like, we'll just have to have another, like, hospital admission. Not an abnormal thing for a medical family. Like, we've got this. We're fine. And I remember when they pulled in, and I was going into shock at this time. So there was somebody with me, and they were working on her, and they wouldn't let me go see her, and they kind of put her on the stretcher into the ambulance, and they were working for a long time in the ambulance. And at this point, I still didn't really know, but I was like, she's going to be fine. I'm just really fucking tired of this shit. Like,
yeah.
She was just okay. What's going on?
Yeah, and she'd been okay for a really long time. She's been okay,
and I was letting my guard down, like we were doing things that we normally wouldn't typically do.
Yeah, right? Experiencing life.
She was experiencing like a child should experience life. So that was really hard. And I remember them pulling away the fire truck and the ambulance with the lights on. And I remember saying to my dad and her dad at the time, I can't go. I need to find her bag, and I need her blankie. I need her blankie because we're going to be there for a while, and she needs her blankie.
Yeah.
She needs her blankie. And it wasn't until I think I got into town, we got into Napanee there where we live, and the closest hospital to us. And I looked at my dad and I said, even if she does pull through this, she's going to be brain dead. Yeah. There's no way somebody with that little went with much oxygen. Like, there's no way. Right? Yeah. And I remember them putting us into a room, and I was like, oh, I've been in these rooms so many times. And the medical staff came to me and they said, are you so-and-so? And I said, yep. And they said, so we've been working on your daughter since the time 911 called for an hour and a half now, and there's no brain activity. And everyone around me, I remember at the time, dropped. And I just stood there, and I didn't even cry. I just said, just stop. Just leave her.
Yeah.
Just leave her alone. And that's where shock protects you.
Because you've always been in like those like fight or flight responses.
Yeah. But shock is quite literally there to save you from dying from a broken heart. That was hard.
Yeah.
That was really hard. No mother, no parent, no loved one should ever have to say, just stop. Just don't make that decision.
You've been through enough like hard decisions.
Yeah. And again, death is the only thing that we're guaranteed on this world.
Yeah.
But not a 2-year-old innocent baby that has fought so hard to be here.
Yep. And for you, I feel like you worked so hard for Gwen, advocating for Gwen, being there with Gwen every step. Like, it truly was you and Gwen.
And that's where it goes back to me holding her down the 6th day and just saying, it's you and I, baby.
And I feel like now, and we're going to do an episode 2. Because now, although this has been super traumatic for you and for your friends and for your family.
Everyone that knew Gwenny.
But the community too, even people who didn't know Gwen, because we come from such a small town, that this really impacted everyone. Like, I remember Joe's cousin reaching out to me saying, like, I've been nonstop crying for Tamara. I don't know Gwen, but, you know, so it really, like, shocked and kind of, like, rippled through our community, I feel like.
Yeah.
And now you're doing some really big things to honor her and to help you grieve. And so we are going to make an episode 2 to talk about it and kind of like the next steps for you, the next chapter for you, and how Gwen is living through.
Lots of exciting things.
Yeah, living through you. So
yes.
And thanks for sharing with me today.
Love you. Love you guys.
If people do want to donate to the Gwen Foundation now, before we kind of get into the details, what can you share about the Gwen Foundation quickly? Maybe Instagram?
Yeah. So the Gwen Effect Foundation is now a legit thing.
Registered.
It's registered through Service Canada.
Yay.
Clap, clap, clap. Super exciting about that. So we actually do have a big appointment coming up for the business account. So that's where all of the funds will be going that have been donated to this point into that account. You know, and I really tell a lot of people to follow me through Instagram.
What's your Instagram?
Diary of a Medical Mama. And that's, you know, where I really talk about the realness and the rawness and everything to do with medical life. And now as a, you know, a mother of a baby, you know, a medical baby that has passed, but also talking about what's next to come for the foundation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if people could check that out and get to kind of know a little bit of the background. I know we're discussing this on the next episode, but I would say, yeah, if you want to reach out now to donate, that would be the best.
They could do that, and that would be a good spot. Good. Well, I can't wait until we can chat more about it.
I'm excited.